That's right, we're here at the sewing machine. I'm going to sew these pleats into place. Like I said earlier, that I had pre-folded these pleats, and what I do is I get the pleat set up just how I want it to be, and then I put a shirt over it or some kind of linen, and I iron over it just to kind of lock and kind of give it a little rigidity so that I can figure out where that pleat is when I'm sewing it. Again, this is the Singer Heavy Duty 4452. Does just fine for this kind of stuff. I'm using 69 or number 69 thread. I triple stitch everything. I'm not going to go through every stitch that I'm doing, but I'll show you how I set things up and get things rolling. So I get the edge of my pleat there. I get about 1/16 of an inch in. I'm literally putting it right on the edge. And then I give it a forward and back. And you know, no hurry. I'm just going nice and slow. Right along the edge of the pleat. I do this all the way to the end, and I go back and forth over it, like I said, 3 times. Then once I get to the end, reverse it 3 or 4 times to really lock it in. Bring it up here. It's got a little cutter on the back. Put that back, and that's that pleat stitched. Now I turn it over to get this pleat in the right direction. Just stick it in there. Same distance, just the edge of the material. 2 or 3 back and forth stitches. Then again, once you get to the end, give it a couple back and forth. Raise your needle up, raise your foot up. And I like to trim as I go, so all these extra threads, I go ahead and cut them off. And then at the end, when I go back through the whole thing when I'm finished, I double check all those and make sure everything's trimmed up. But with that, you see that we have the pleat in place. It's ready to go. So now I'm going to put an edge along here and on the other side to kind of hold this together. I mean, if I could just sew it and that'd be fine, I think, but I'd like to put a little something, a little backing on it, just kind of make sure it stays in place. There's your pleat, all the way down. So what I'm going to use to secure this edge and give it a little bit backing is I just found some webbing that I have laying around. This is, I think, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, pretty thin webbing, just something to give it a little back. One thing you got to be sure is to identify where your back and where your front is. And for me, I like to sit on the 2-inch wide actual pleat bottom. So that is what I'm calling the front, and the back is where your separation is. So that's where I'm going to secure this webbing to. I like to start it right where the bend is and have it go right along the edge. One thing you really want to do is make sure that your pleat is closed up tight here when you're sewing this. Kind of hold it in place. You can put needles to hold it in place if you want. I don't. Again, gotta do your back and forth. Here I go around the edge. Then I'll turn it around and go back down the other side. Lift your foot up. Whenever you lift your foot up, it's sewing 101, but make sure your needle's down. That way your material just kind of spins around on the needle. And this is where the Singer is. There's a little bit of a disadvantage. You don't have a big opening here to deal with between the body of the machine and the needle, so you just kind of wad stuff up in there, make it work. Here, I'll spin around, go around the corner again. I'll do this 3 times and I'll do a run up the middle. So once you get both of your edges on, I like to trim it up around the around the curve. Doesn't have to be super pretty because you're putting binding over this anyway. And always melt it. If you don't, it will come loose on you, one way or another. Not the thread, but the webbing will unfray on you. Alright, so there's both ends of that secured, and that makes a pleat. I'll take it over to the table and show you how that works. Alright, so now we got our pleats sewn, our pleat edging done, just kind of to give it a little bit of backing, and we're going to be binding it. But you can see how that works. There's your pleat. When you're sitting in it, kind of open it up. You're actually be sitting in it this way. It opens up. Just fold it back in there. I don't know if that's the right way, but that's the way I do it. I have actually never owned one of the commercial pleated saddles, but this seems to make sense, and it's worked on my other one, so that's what I'm going with. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put binding around the edge. So, quick note about binding. What I like to do, you can buy binding that's chevron. It's got these little chevrons on it, and the tip of the chevron is the center. I like this binding material because it's a little bit heavier than most, but it doesn't have a center mark. So, and a lot of people, you can buy attachments for these machines that will fold this over. It makes it a lot easier. I'm not sure what they call that. I don't have one, so this is what I do. I fold the binding over with a gross grain, and I'll just kind of crease it with my hand. And I'll do the whole length of the binding material that way. That way I've got a good center mark, so when I put it over the edge, I've got something that it actually fits into, and I can center it up and make sure that it's on there nice and even. So fold it in half, run your fingers across it, create yourself a little crease. Kind of a pain in the rear to do the tire length, but it's worth it in the long run because it makes it a lot cleaner when you sew it on. Alright, so before we put the binding on, or the gross grain, and all the other webbing, one thing I like to do is I like to mark the center line, which we've marked earlier. And then I like to measure 3 inches over either end of the center line. I do that top and bottom. The purpose for that is to mark where I start and stop any overlap. So the gross grain, I'll start here, I'll go around, and I'll end up over here. And then when I do the actual chassis, the 2-inch webbing, I'll do the same. I'll start here and I'll overlap over here. But then when I put the Molly loops and the lineman's loops on, I'll overlap those down here. And the only reason I stagger that is so that up here I'm not trying to sew through 6 different layers of webbing. That's one of the limitations to using not an industrial machine. So I stagger where I'm doing my overlaps and my joints. So now we're going to go over here and do the binding. Alright, so now we're ready to put the binding on the saddle. I got a little excited earlier and messed up one of my video clips, so I cut a little piece of scrap that I wanted to show you. So you got your binding that we pre-creased. You just fit it as tight over the edge of the saddle material as you can. Slide it in there, I like to try to catch it as close to the edge of the gross grain as I can. Making sure it's tight against the saddle material. Give it and then what I like to do is tuck it up underneath. And the good thing about the mesh material is you can see through it. See where you're at. Just kind of keep pulling away with it. Make sure it's tight and even. Take your time, make sure everything's fitted. And when you get to corners, you're going to get pleats. It's fine, it ain't hurt anything. What I like to do is lift the foot with my needle down. Push that crease up under the foot. At least if you gotta keep curving it around. Close it out. Now once you get to the end, remember you're going to overlap. You're going to overlap this end by 3 inches because you started 3 inches back, so you get a total of 6 inches of overlap. But you're going to overlap this section by 3 inches. Once you get there, you just fold the end of the gross grain over to finish it off. What's that? Alright, so once the gross grain is all put on, I like to come back over to the table, remark my center line and my 3-inch lines so that all my overlap lines are still established. My center line is still visible. Now we're going to measure for the leg loop connection. I'll measure from the edge. I go on the inside of the gross grain. Just 28 inches to coverage from the inside of the gross grain to the inside of the gross grain. And I add 8 inches to either side, which gives me a 4-inch overlap. And that allows me to have 3 inches with my loop sticking out over the edge. So that's 16 additional inches. A total of 44 inches. 36. 44 inches. Now we'll go back over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to loop this over by 8 inches. Do some bar stitches across here. Actually, I'll probably do a box X stitch right in this area. Give myself enough of a hook to hang over the edge. Alright, back at the machine to finish up our leg loops, connectors that actually mount to the saddle. Again, I cut these edges of this webbing so I can melt them down. It keeps everything from fraying. I'll mark 8 inches right here. Give it a fold. And that's going to be my box stitch area. I've got this sewing pretty long. I'm going to turn it down to shorten up the length of the sewing machine strokes. I like to give myself about ½ an inch where the G hook actually will go into. For the box stitch, I just lined this corner edge up, line in there, give my X. Stitch this, I follow this box stitch trace 3 different times to get my triple stitch that I'm looking for. And I'll do both ends. Alright, so once you got both ends box stitched, I like to turn this to where my seating side is up. This is the side I'm going to sit on. So I actually want to put this on the outside of that. So I'm putting it on the back side of the saddle. And the way I do it is I take the leg loop connection on the saddle, fold it in half, and mark my halfway mark. And that's going to line up with my center mark on the saddle there when I sew it up. Now, one thing I do, and this is another trick if you're using a home machine or one of these Singer heavy duties, is I like to put this just above the gross grain, and that's where I'll sew it in at, so that when you sew in your 2-inch, you're not sewing through this. You're sewing to your gross grain and to the saddle, and you're straddling this strap, so you're not trying to punch through this in 3 or 4 different layers of webbing. So we're going to take this over to the machine, sew this in place. A lot of folks, so this is that flat 1-inch webbing that I talked about on the first video. This is what I use for the leg loops and the belt loop as well. A lot of guys, when they're putting this part together, which is the connector for the leg loops, they'll use a high vis color, orange or fluorescent green or something like that, so that you can see these loops in the dark. I never put my saddle on in the dark, so I don't do that. I just like to go with a kind of a neutral color that matches up with everything. Alright, so we're going to take this over and sew this leg loop connector onto the saddle. Alright, so we're going to sew the leg loop connector to the saddle. This is a good time to check your bobbin. Make sure you got enough thread on there to finish this section off, which we do. So, put the saddle on there, line my center line mark up. Again, I sew just above the gross grain. use that as a guide. Got a little off center there, but it's all right. This is all hidden by the belt. And we'll get to the outside edge, turn the corner, turn it around. I like to push down on my fingers to keep the mesh pulled all the way out of the from underneath the webbing. It also keeps it from buckling. Once I get back to the center line, I'll go ahead and turn that corner, go back up to the top. And then do the same thing on the other side, all the way back up and around. Alright, so now we have our leg loop connection for the saddle in place. What I'll do from here is I'll go in and I'll remark my 3 lines again so I know where my overlap is. Like I said, I leave a 1/2 inch on the end so that the G-hook goes in smoothly but it's still a little bit tight. So that's how that'll connect up. It'll actually connect up this way. So when you got your leg loops on, pull them down a little bit. It's pretty comfortable that way. Alright, so now it's time for the big thing, which is the 2-inch webbing going all the way around, create the lineman's loop, the bridge loops, and keep rolling. Alright, we're ready to start putting the main chassis on the saddle. I'm working on the back side of the saddle, the side I'm not sitting on. I've got my 3 lines marked so I know where my overlap is, and I start on my furthest line. What I like to do is I like to put the webbing about 1/8 of an inch below the end of the growth grain. That's where I started. Always check, make sure your bobbin's got enough thread in it. Alright, and I'll just take it slow and make sure I'm going about 1/8 inch below the growth grain the whole way. Again, you're just letting the machine do the work. Then once it starts running out right here at the corner, that's where I start making the turn. You can see where the bend kind of cups in after the 1/8 of an inch. That's where I'll start making my turn in. The key here is to keep this flat when you do this so that you're not creating a buckle on the back end of your and from there, I'll lift the foot. Sorry about the kick machine here. Turn that whole thing around. Start working my way back. I'm going to catch a corner of this pleat, which is a good thing. It's kind of giving us the shape of the pleat. Just remember to keep pushing down here so that your mesh is pushed out from underneath the webbing. Straight back up, and then again triple stitch. I go back around 3 times. Alright, so here's where we put the first line or the bridge loop together. I got the top section of the main chassis webber sewn in. What I do is I fold it up in front of me, keeping the same surface of the webbing upwards. Lay that down there. That's going to be the inside of the bridge loop. I need 2 10-inch sections of the tubular webbing. What I like to do is I cut it and I'll open the end up like so. Heat it up, kind of make sure it's smooth in there with your finger. That's that. Then what I do is I take this end, I fold it into thirds. Probably the easier way to do this is the way I do it. And I like the red stripe on the bottom, or whatever stripe comes on your tubular webbing. That's where I put it. It's kind of up to you. And then I just kind of feed it through. Just keep folding it, pushing it through as you go. Eventually you get close enough to the end to grab it with a pair of needle nose. I get in there with a needle nose, grab it, kind of finish pulling it through. Then once I get enough through, what I do is I clamp it down to the table, the tag end of the main chassis webbing, like so. through. Like so. Every once in a while you want to check it and make sure that your edges are all lined up. And you want to keep that red line at the center as you can on the center of the webbing. You just keep doing that until you get 3 inches from the bottom edge of your main webbing. So I'm going to mark 3 inches from the bottom edge of my main webbing, and I'm going to pull this piece of tubular webbing all the way through until I hit that 3-inch mark. Alright, so you see I marked my 3 inches off the edge. I've just about finished pulling the webbing up to that 3-inch mark. Now what I do is I go through and twist my webbing around, kind of manipulate it around so that it'll sit pretty flat on the material. And then what I do is I mark 3 inches from the bottom of that webbing. That's going to be my connection point back to the saddle. Get everything sewn up. And that gives me a 17-inch loop from the saddle material. So earlier on, I think it was video 1, we talked about needing 17 inches for your loops, and that's where that comes into play. So I've got 3 inches, I've got 10 inches, and I got another 3, and I'm sewing in at the back side of the gross grain. I'll come around like that. Now a lot of folks go short on this, 5-7 inches. I don't see why. I'm just going to go to full length because it's full length of protection on the webbing, so why not? So again, now we're going to go back to the machine and show you how I sew the protective sheath onto the bridge loop. Alright, so we're back here at the machine, ready to sew up our bridge loop, especially the sheath, and we're going to talk about how you can make the nodes in here to have the adjustable bridge loops. I don't use those anymore. I tried those on a couple and they're great, they work awesome, but I like a pinch style bridge. So again, we pulled this out to our 3-inch mark from the bottom edge of the webbing. And all I do is I put it on the machine, come in about I guess about 1/4 of an inch. And what I do is I start at the middle of the webbing. Otherwise it's going to push all your webbing to one side. So I start at the middle. I give it 4 back and forths. Kind of just a regular old bar stitch. Cut off my threads. Now if I am making the nodes for an adjustable bridge, what I'll do is I'll put another bar right in behind that, just kind of keep it tight. And then what you do, make sure that folds right, you get your 1/2-inch nylon ball that we talked about earlier, and you just kind of shove it right in there, and it's tight, or it should be. That's what it is. And once you get it started, what I do is take the back of a knitting needle, put it in there, and ram it on through. And you push that all the way to the end, and then you're going to go behind it and put a stitch behind it and that gives you the raised node for your adjustable bridge. So a tack bar behind that, 4 or 5 times across, put your next ball in right against it, come down, put another tack bar in. You just keep doing that 4 or 5 balls, whatever it is that you want. That's how you make that adjustable knot. I am not going to do that because I'm using the bridge friction. So what I do is once I get this first side tacked is I go right down through the middle. You see, even with this machine, I'm punching through 3 pretty thick layers of webbing. The key is to try to stay as center as you can. Once I get about a 1/2 inch away from that end, pick it up and turn it. You just kind of straight bar hitch. And I'll work my way back down the center again. Do that 2 more times. I actually do 4 right down the center of this part. So I finished up those stitches, and there is your bridge loop all set. I do 1, like I said, I just do the 1 line down the middle. Some guys do 2. I'm fine with just the 1. It still makes it pretty, but it's still very stiff, and it's plenty pliable. And I want it to be a little bit soft because of the type of bridge I'm using. I want it to be able to lock in. So now what I do is I get that 3-inch mark that I put up earlier. Again, we're working on the top. I want to make sure that I've got both of the open ends of the webbing on the top. I put that 3-inch mark right in line with the inside edge of the gross grain. Keeping in mind that we're wanting to make it 1/8 of an inch away from the gross grain on the side. Now start a little bit higher up instead of right on the bottom. Put your foot down. Alright, so the next step is to fold your bridge loop over so that you got both of your open ends on the same side. I put it on the inside so it's pointing towards me when I'm sitting in the saddle. You line up your 3-inch mark from the edge of that tubular webbing to the inside of the gross grain. Make sure this is all lined up. Get that into place, and I'm doing the same stitch, same thing, 1/8 of an inch off the gross grain. Set. One thing I didn't do is I didn't start on the corner just because I like everything to line up. So I'll catch that corner. After I get up here a little ways, I'll go back to it. Alright. Make sure the needle's down. Flip it around. Catch that bend. I want to trim this edge off just so it doesn't get caught up in there. It's the same thing as you did on the other side. As soon as I get to the corner, I'll start turning that corner. And on that one, we punch through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of webbing. Now I'm going to go back around and go and follow this top edge again, all the way down to the other side. Alright. You just keep running the edge of the growth screen all the way down to the next side. Now if you run into a situation where you're bobbing, you got to keep checking it. If it looks like it's going to run out of thread, all you have to do is give yourself some stitches, back stitch it. What I do is take a piece of chalk, mark where I stop stitching, take everything off, cut the line, fill your bobbin, get everything set back up, start an inch behind where you last stitched, double stitch it, and keep rolling. Alright, now I'm down to the next bend. Again, we're stitching through a lot of webbing here. Get around that corner. Flip everything around, and I'm ready to start the bottom end of the bottom webbing strip. And I'll follow that all the way down to the back to the first loop that we created, and cut it off and go back to the table and set up the next loop. Something you want to keep in mind is why it's important to keep pushing this down is because you're actually creating the cup with this webbing. As it lays flat on the curved surface, it's going to create a natural cup. So it's really important to always push this down while you're sewing it. Alright, so here's where we're at now. We sewed our first loop, our first lineman's loop. Put our protective 1-inch tubular on it. You can see when you sew the webbing in, it starts to create the cup already. So you're already getting a kind of a cup to the saddle itself. It's good to take it and just check your pleat, make sure everything's going to work out fine, which it is. You should be able to take that, pop that pleat right back into place, which you can. So now we're going to create the second lineman's loop. Is the same way you did the first one. Lay the webbing down, kind of fold it back here on itself. Get that second piece of 1-inch tubular webbing. $10-inch piece. usually at the end, I just stick my finger in there to make sure it's nice and smooth, or else your webbing will hang up. It also stretches it out a little bit. That's all done, and then we do the same thing. So once again, you're going to keep your red line on the back side. Fold this up into thirds. So let me move this back so we can see. Keep a red line on the back. And just like last time, we're going to make a 3-inch mark on the inside loop, on the inside of the gross grain, then onto the webbing, slide that down to the 3 inches, and put a 3-inch loop or 3-inch mark behind it before we're going to match it back up to the saddle. Alright, so we got the webbing up to 3 inches from the edge of the gross grain, just like we did on the other side. Now I'm going to sew it up just like I did on the other side. If you were going to do the adjustable nodes in there, you do the same thing as we talked about last time. A couple bar stitches around this edge, about a 1/2 inch up, shove a ball in, sew another bar stitch behind that, shove another ball in, and that's how you make your nodes. I don't do that, so I'm going to sew this end up, and then I'm going to do just like we did on the last one. Go ahead and attach it and go all the way down past my first 3-inch, the halfway point, and then to the next 3-inch mark. Alright, so we got our last loop made, and we're on our top edge of the saddle, getting ready to do the joint, which is, in my opinion, the most important stitch you're going to do on the saddle. So this is where we're overlapped. This is 3 inches past center. This is the center line. And this is my 3-inch mark that I'm going to start turning around. Pretty close to the edge. Flip it. Make sure I keep everything pushed down. Again. So what I want to do is remark my center mark and my other 3-inch mark, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a box stitch here and a box stitch here. That way I'm splitting that up into 2 different box stitches, and we still get the overlap on either one. So if, God forbid, one of them was to pop, the other one's still going to hold. So 2 box stitches right in here. It's actually a box X stitch. You do the box and you do an X in the center. go back all the way down to the end. I'll go back and triple stitch everything, including the box stitch. Alright, so we got everything sewn up with the main chassis. So basically what you have at this point is a glorified sit and drag that expands. This is actually a usable saddle at this point. The rest of what we're doing is we're going to add the MOLLE, the bridge loops, which I'm going to show you. And remember when I said earlier on that we stagger that, so I've got my, I don't know if you can see the box stitching there, but I got my 2 box stitching onto joint. That's not coming apart, it's triple stitched. So for the MOLLE and the alignments, I'm going to overlap those on the bottom, so I'm not trying to stitch through everything. Then we'll add the leg loops and the belt, and we'll be good to go. Just to show you how it looks when it expands. When it expands out, there's a pretty big sitting surface there. There you go. Now, time to start getting ready for the, oh, one thing I did wrong that I said earlier I wasn't going to do, which I did, and I've done it several times, and it always messes me up, is on this side I have my folds on my 2-inch webbing on the inside where they fit against me. On this side, I did the reverse. I put them on the outside, which was a mistake. But this one's on my here. That's on the outside. On this one, it's on the inside. It's no structural difference. Doesn't make any difference at all as far as the structure or the strength goes. It's just an aesthetic thing and an OCD thing. But I'm gonna leave it as is. It ain't gonna bother me any. Because when I'm hanging there, I'm not gonna care. All right. So now onto the MOLLE. So keeping the top away from it, the way I do it, and people do it differently. I like having a MOLLE loop on the center instead of having the sewn on the center. I don't know why, but I do. So actually it's the opposite. I like the sewn on the center, not the MOLLE loop on the center. So I will sew my first joint right here, right next to the split of where I have these 2 box X stitches, and I'll start working my way around, and then we'll create the bridge loop, which again you need 2 10-inch pieces of the 1/2 inch or the 1-inch tubular webbing, and you're going to prep those the same way. You're going to cut your 10 inches, expand, burn the ends, put your finger in there and wallow to make sure it's all smooth and opened up. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and start the MOLLE loops, which I'm using the same black tubular webbing for. I start at the bottom, again, 3 inches past center, so I can get 3 inches over, or 6 inches overlap. So what I do, and I do center of the 2-inch webbing. I don't put MOLLE loops on the bottom. If you want to, go ahead. I'll show you how to do that when I get to the top. The first thing I do is I put a mark 2 inches behind the inside edge of where the webbing and the mesh meet. I put a mark 2 inches behind that. I'll go ahead and line out my webbing starting on that 4 3-inch point. Follow the contour of the saddle. I put a mark there, and that is where I'm going to put my 10-inch piece of 1-inch tubular webbing. I'm going to go ahead and run this through the webbing like I did on the bridge loops, and bring the end of it right up to here. And I keep the red marks up. It's actually really easy to do. Just like Sean's in, just grab one of your pliers. Brand's gonna mark. I'm gonna take it over to the sewing machine and sew that center line down and finish setting up the bridge loop. Right now I've got that bridge loop inside of the other 10-inch piece of 1-inch tubing, and we'll sew it up. I just do a bar stitch right across this top and then right down the center. Critical to keep this right in the middle. So take it slow, because you have to be able to get 2 pieces of zip tie in the center. Once you get that stitched up, get your zip tie. I like to clip off the tip of it. Round it off a little bit. And then what I do is I push it all the way down to the bottom, then I pull it back about 1/4 inch. I clip it right at the edge. I take the end of that zip tie and push it all the way in there. And that gives you enough edge to sew it down. And then you put the next side down. Okay, so once you have both pieces of your zip tie in there, you see you got a nice rigid lineman's loop, and that's when I start sewing it down. So I will start on this side, matching it up to my line here. I like to keep it centered of the webbing, the 2-inch webbing. Put the red line up, both of them. This is where the narrow throat of this singer kind of is a disadvantage. I give it a bar stitch, I move it over 1/2 inch, do another. Then I start, so like I said, I don't put molly loops on the bottom, so I just pick it up, start sewing it down. And I've got I'm on the far 3 inch, so I get my overlap when we end up back around. And I'll keep looping that around. Go to the other side, bring my 2 inch line in to the bottom, and I'll pick it back up there. Alright, so I sewed the bottom of the 1 inch, or along the bottom of the 1 inch, triple sewed all the way around, got my 2 bar stitches. Now I'm ready to start it on the other side. So what I do is I take this end, this same side up, this side up, loops around, twist it to the side up. This is where it gets a little tricky. And I'm going to line it up with the 2 inch mark, 2 inches from here, the inside of the webbing, and the end of the saddle meet 2 inches in, and I'm going to sew it right in there like that. But first I'm going to bar stitch my zip tie so it doesn't come out. These stitch ends, I'll clean those up now. Inch. Alright, and now we're ready for the molly loops. And this is pretty simple. What I do is I use a 12-inch socket. I put the socket in, I pull it tight, pull it over to where the foot bumps up against the socket. Make sure I'm centered on my webbing, and I Go for it. Now don't cut it or anything. I'll do that all afterwards. And all you need is 2 runs because it's just moly loop. Show you it again. Pull some slack. Put your socket in there. Pull it over. Pull up against your footing. Make sure you're centered. Straight. And again. And I do that all the way across the back until I get to the other side. I make the other bridge loop and I come back and I loop and I make sure I get my 3 inches of overlap, sew it down, and it's done. That's right. I've gone pretty much all the way back along the back, putting in the moly loops. I stopped about 4 inches shy of the 2-inch mark for this side so that I can go and put the sheath on here and put the zip ties in just like I did on the other side. And I'll finish these mollies, sew it in there, then loop around, tie into the back end. I'll check in with you guys when I finish that. Alright, just about done tying in the 1-inch tubular webbing. One thing I wanted to show you is we have our center mark for the bottom. What I do is I loop my leg loop through, which is 1 2-yard piece of that flat nylon webbing. I loop it through there, sew it right in so it's kind of a part of the whole thing. I'll just keep finishing up my all the way to my 3-inch mark, loop back around, and we'll be good. Alright, so here's where we're at so far. I just finished putting in the moly loops, putting in the bridge loops. As you can see, those are stiff and they stick out. Brought this all the way back around. One thing I did differently, and you can do whatever you want to do, was I shortened my moly loops on this one and left a bigger pocket, just because sometimes I've run into play times when I wanted a slot like that to put something in, so I left that on the right side, which is my working side. Got the leg loops in. I'm gonna put the G hooks on, put the belt on. We'll be good to go. All right, so the last thing I'm doing, other than cleaning it all up and squaring up a few little things away, is I'm putting my belt loops on. Again, I don't think a belt is load bearing. For me, it isn't on these saddles. So what I do is I tie into the last 3 moly sewings. I put this on the back side, on the inside of the saddle, and also directly over where I sewed the moly loops to tag that in. And I'll do that on both sides. And then when you put the saddle on, you wrap it around. Got enough to put a buckle on. All right, and there it is. Got the belt loop put in. Like I said, I put 2 or 3 moly loops back. Again, it's not load bearing for me. Neither are the leg loops, although none of it's going anywhere, I don't think. Got the G hooks connected up, and I'll show you how it flexes out. The back side, pleat. Extend the pleat, that's what you get. I left the leg loops long because I'm going to test it out, and then what I'll do is I'll cut off the excess and sew a thumb loop so you can just pull it when you need to. And that's it. Now I'm going to throw a temporary bridge on it and give it a go here in the garage. This isn't the bridge I'm going to use, it's just a little temporary one I keep around. Good. Bridge is long. I think it usually about chin height, the bridge. And my tether, I like higher, I got too much crap hanging here right now. I think that's gonna work. There you go. Saddle built with the Singer heavy duty.